stories where birds ignite. From reports to diaries, our stories take flight. With vocabulary gems and plots so grand, we'll transport you to worlds across every land. Get ready to listen to stories to ignite your imagination, where each story...
Chapter 2. The Mysterious Mishap. The morning sun crept cautiously over the horizon, as if it too was unsure of what had happened the day before. Inside the classroom, Edward Eggleton, now fully restored to his human form, bow tie neatly in place, hair defiantly tousled, sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a sea of curious faces. The students stared at him like he was the last slice of pizza at a party, half in disbelief and half in glee. "Did you really just turn into a dog, Mr. Eggleton?" squeaked Timmy Thompson, the class clown, who was still clutching his belly from laughter. "Indeed I did," Edward replied, puffing out his chest like a proud peacock. "And let me assure you it was rather rough." He grinned, waggling his eyebrows comically, but inside he felt a twinge of unease. Something was off. As the students erupted into another fit of giggles, Edward looked down at himself, expecting to see nothing but the familiar tweed jacket and polka-dotted bow tie. However, as he glanced at his hands, he noticed something quite peculiar. His nails were not the usual short and neatly trimmed, but rather they had transformed into claws, sharp and gleaming like tiny onyx daggers. Mr. Eggleton?" piped up Lucy, the brainiac of the class, her eyes wide with concern. "Your hands look different?" Edward glanced again, and his heart did a little somersault of panic. Oh dear," he exclaimed, his voice rising an octave. "I seem to have a slight problem." Just then, a strange low growl emanated from somewhere deep within him. He clutched his stomach, which rumbled ominously. "That's odd," he muttered. "I didn't eat anything unusual, except for that rather questionable dog biscuit during my canine phase." The students watched, a mix of horror and fascination, as Edward suddenly stood up and began to pace the classroom. With each step, he felt a strange compulsion tugging at him, as if an invisible leash were pulling him toward Mrs. Bickle's prized potted plant in the corner. "Must resist," he grunted, eyes locked on the innocent fern as though it were a juicy steak. The plant, oblivious to the internal struggle, stood tall and green, its leaves beckoning like a siren's call. "Mr. Eggleton, are you sure you're okay?" Timmy asked, the laughter now replaced by genuine concern. "I'm perfectly fine," Edward barked, quite literally. An inexplicable bark erupted from his throat, causing the students to jump back in surprise. Just then, the classroom door swung open with a dramatic creak, and in walked the principal, Mr. Snodgrass. The man was a towering figure with a stiff comb-over that looked like it had survived an earthquake. He glanced at the scene before him, and his eyebrows shot up as if they were trying to escape his forehead. "Eggleton," he bellowed, "what on earth is going on here?" Well, you see, sir," Edward stammered, but before he could explain, he felt an overwhelming urge to run, and run he did, darting out of the classroom like a bullet from a gun, propelled by a mix of confusion and a newfound instinct. "Catch him!" Mr. Snodgrass shouted, but Edward was already dashing down the hallway, dodging students and teachers like a pinball in a machine. His heart raced as he took sharp corners, the sensation of freedom and chaos swirling around him. As he skidded to a halt in front of the school's science lab, Edward glanced into the mirror hanging on the wall. What he saw made his stomach drop. His eyes glinted with a familiar canine mischief, and his hair seemed to shimmer with a hint of fur. Panic gripped him. Clearly, not everything had reverted back to normal. "Something is terribly wrong," he exclaimed, half to himself, half to the bewildered students who had followed him. "What have I done?" Little did Edward know the mystery was only just beginning. Would he remain a half-human, half-dog science teacher forever? And what about the mysterious growl echoing from deep within? Was there more to this peculiar predicament than met the eye? As Edward Eggleton stood there, wrestling with the absurdity of his situation, one thing was for certain: the day was bound to get much stranger.
Diamond stories where birds ignite. From reports to diaries, our stories take flight. With vocabulary gems and plots so grand, we'll transport you to worlds across every land. Get ready to listen to stories to ignite your imagination, where each story